Welcome to Wickedshizuku's Reviews, bringing you a southern perspective on books, movies, music, and much, much more. Stick around for a while, you just might hear something wicked. Well, hello, and welcome back to Wickedshizuku's Reviews, Thoughts on News, Episode 7. Quite a busy Monday. So, I have a few things lined up, and I have a new share option. I'm hoping that's going to work for everybody. Okay. So, how was everyone's weekend? Ours went about the same. Okay.
The big story, we're kind of, I don't know, we're kind of dealing with the same crap. If you look at the shooting in Florida, it's the same crap. It's a Nazi with a gun. Okay, got it. Nazis, bad. Guns, neutral. Let's make sure that Nazis don't have guns. Might be a good idea. Unfortunately, the progressives are trying to make sure that no one has guns except for them.
Yeah, right.
It's a bad thing.
Because those Nazis don't typically listen to rules all that well.
I know.
When they're made by people who they don't like.
Yeah.
The thing that fascinated me a little bit about that story was, number one, how it's a national story. Like, it sounds like a really terrible incident, obviously. Like, anytime there's a shooting of 3 people, it's a terrible incident. But, like, how many times does that happen in Chicago or every other major city? Like, I guess it's not a story when the people have the same color skin doing it to each other. If it's 2 white people doing it to each other or 2 black people doing it to each other, we don't report on it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But because this manifesto, which we suddenly have almost immediately, which I thought was not the pattern anymore. I thought we had to wait months and months and months for politically based ideological rants about murders.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden we have it right away in this case. And because it's apparently a completely insane person with a dash of racism, or maybe a heaping spoonful of racism,
Maybe
involved.
a shovel
Of racism.
Yeah.
But like seemingly other indications it was beyond racism, like real mental health difficulties and insanity going on. But we learned about that right away, and it's to me kind of amazing how quickly we've had this total turnaround. You go back and look at polls from 15, 20 years ago, and you see America was pretty close to having racism solved. That's not by me saying it. It's the people who were living at the time, including African Americans, saying like, yeah, things are pretty good race-wise. And
I have to say that that's definitely true. I think I was one of the last ones before the actual woke agenda started to kick in. I think I graduated just in the nick of time before it happened in high school. But while I was having my children and raising them, the colleges got out of control. I went one semester and I was done. I was like, what am I, if I'm just If my goal is to be a good wife and mother, what is the use of a college degree? So, you know, there is that.
And it's completely fallen apart ever since we've decided to try this solution of, hey, everybody, what if we all say that all white people are racist no matter what they do or say, and we'll also say all black people are victims and have no chance of succeeding on their own no matter what they do or say, and let's give that a shot for a couple decades and see how it turns out. Not well, apparently.
Yeah, I think we've done it. Not, we're just a few years from 2 decades of doing it. 2028 will be the 20th anniversary of, racial and social justice.
The post-racial period.
Yes, yeah. And the post-racial period. And it's not turning out to be quite like that.
Just elect Barack Obama and you get the post-racial period.
It'll be wonderful.
And it's funny because you remember, we were, of course, covering that back in the day. And I remember walking, we did this coverage and we were in New York City at the time. And I remember walking to the hotel I was staying at from the studios. And, people were, again, remember this is New York City. People were in the streets celebrating, in the streets trying to, not just because he was a Democrat, but I think larger because he was black. It was like our first black president. And even though I thought he was going to be a terrible president, and you thought he was going to be a terrible president, and everyone in this audience thought he was going to be a terrible president, there was still that piece of like, well, there's a real cost to this because he's going to be a bad president, but at least it's good that, like, we can all put this race thing finally behind us. Like, this is ridiculous. Yeah. Obviously, we elected a black president. Yeah. This is not a racist country. Yeah. Completely wrong. Yeah. But the total opposite way in every single possible.
First president is like, I am powerless.
Yeah, right.
I am powerless. I got here despite all the racists in the country. And you're like, wait, what? What happened?
How did that? What? That's not.
Yeah, the Klan, they were out. They were out in force voting for Barack Obama, I guess.
So, if you want to find out a lot more on Barack Obama's camp, look into Peter Schweitzer's Secret Empires and his ties with the Pritzker family.
How else did he win if we're all Klans members?
Yeah. Amazing. What a weird time. It's been every piece of medicine they've tried to apply to this problem has done the exact reverse.
Well, but at least it's only in one category. For instance, it's not in like education. The more the progressive gets involved in education, the worse the education gets.
Okay, that's two examples though. That's all you have. You have nothing else other than those two.
We have the more they try to lower gas prices through regulation, the higher the gas price goes.
Well, sure. That one's well known, but that's really about it.
You also have this promise of equality, and blacks had and minorities had the best they've ever had in success and prosperity under Donald Trump. But now that they've promised that they were going to equalize things and make things better for the working class, blacks and Hispanics, they're no longer enjoying that prosperity.
Yeah, there's a story out today that's skyrocketing.
Yeah,
right.
So that's weird. Isn't it?
It's a stunner.
It's weird.
It's almost like everything they touch turns to
garbage.
I was going to use a different word than that. Yes.
It's hey, our Inflation Reduction Act does the exact opposite.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, sir, you have a few thousand examples, and that's about it.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
I only have everything they do and say. How much we're going to reimagine.
Okay, I'm sorry, everyone, but I have to turn the speed up. I'll leave it at 1.5. And here we go.
The police and make our communities safer.
Has that worked?
Well, my question is, have you had enough yet? Have you had enough yet? Do you have enough evidence yet? Because I do. I've had it for quite some time, but maybe I was just quick on the uptake on this particular 1,000 issues. When have you had enough?
And you realize, I think, when you look at our major cities around the country, there's never a time they get it. It never comes. You can put the same people in office for 100 years.
They have,
and they failed for 100 years, and they will still elect the same people.
I know.
It's incomprehensible. Honestly, wouldn't you just try something else out of default? Right? You know what? I don't know. Look, the whole low taxes freedom thing sounds terrible to me. But maybe we should get a world. Right? Like, isn't there a moment you consider that? And the answer largely is no.
No.
They don't
New
never
York,
consider it.
New York, same thing. And it kills me the way New York is now reacting to the migrant problem. Oh gosh, it is. It's crippling New York City. And they've got like what 35,000, and it's just crippling them. They can't handle it. Have you been to Houston? Have you been to Dallas? Have you been to the border? Have you been to Arizona? I mean, what are you talking about? Have you been to California? Yeah, because New York, you don't even have to fly. The only difference between you and Los Angeles now, palm trees. That's it. Oh, and snotty celebrities. No, you've got enough snotty celebrities there.
It's fascinating to watch this because, of course, obviously, places like Texas and other border states have been complaining about this forever and saying, like, we got a real problem here. No one's helping us. And, but it's amazing to see, like, a few buses. Like, this is what set you over the edge. Your society was so close to the edge that a few buses of people that you said you wanted, by the way. We should point out, you were welcoming your sanctuary city. You wanted this so badly. A few buses show up from the South, and all of a sudden you can't run your society anymore. I will say, like, Texas, it gets all this beating about how these evil right-wingers and how they hate immigrants. Like, look, our day-to-day life in Texas is filled with interactions with illegal immigrants. They live in our society all around us, and, like, largely we just get along with them. Now, we all realize there are societal issues with our law and how that works, but, like, generally speaking, like, we wish the law was applied better, but, like, if they're here, like, you have interactions with them, they're like any other person. We treat them like every other person, even though we don't think the law is being applied appropriately. New York's like, they see 4 people with, like, Hispanic last names, and they just decide they're going to abandon the state. Like, well, what is happening? Why can't you figure this out?
Because here's the difference. In Texas, generally speaking, they'll go to work.
Yeah, exactly.
In New York, they go to the plaza.
And why would they go to work?
Why would you?
In Texas, like, you do get, look, there are definitely people living off the dole. Like, the criticisms we have of the system are real. But, like, you're right. A lot of people come here, even though they're not supposed to be here, and they shouldn't be here because they're breaking the law being here. But they go every day, and they work, and
Well, some people in Alabama might remember what Governor Bentley did before he was thrown out on his ass, is that he imposed the visa laws, made sure of it. And if any employer was hiring illegals, they were shut down. So I suppose if governors actually put their foot down and got off of their asses and imposed the fucking laws for labor, then maybe we might have a different story going on. Just a thought.
they interact with people and have a relatively normal life. And while there are major problems, somehow Texas has been able to do it without, by the way, a state income tax, I should point out. They're somehow able to we're keeping this society running with, I don't know, 10 times, 20 times as many illegal immigrants and no state income tax. And yet this place runs 100 times better than New York. I live there. I was born there. I know. It runs much, much better. I've lived in both places. It's not close. So what is the problem? I don't know. Could it go back to the original part of this conversation?
Well, no, I don't think so. No. I mean, because look, our schools are safer now. All of our schools, they're all saying, we want children to feel safe, to express who they are and be safe. And there's a teacher of the month, Casey McGrath. She is fabulous. Just won teacher of the month. And she's got this little thing. She was raping a student at the time. But I think those are separate.
What? She won teacher of the month in the same month as this was going on?
Well, she was unlawfully and knowingly engaging in sexual penetration with a person of at least 13 years. Okay, so,
was it one of those things where, like, she had been doing this the month before and stopped, and they said good improvement?
No, I don't think so. I had another teacher in New York City who posted on social media about teaching children consent. We got to make sure that we teach our kids about consent, and hey, they can consent. Apparently, she taught it really well to a 14-year-old student. She taught it to that 14-year-old student over and over and over again for many, many months.
A lot of dedication.
A lot of dedication there. So I don't know about you. Again, I'm going to promise you your kids are going to feel safe. And, well, they're not. No, they're not. They're not. That's weird. Again, name the policy. Name the thing that they're saying they're trying to stop. And show me the policy where it hasn't gotten 1,000 times worse.
Wow.
Hey, fellow lobsters, if you've ever read 12 Rules for Life, have you ever wondered how to talk to your kids about these ideas? Well, now there's a Tuttle Twins book talking just about the 12 Rules, simplified for kids.
Hey everybody, Peter Zhang here, coming to you from Colorado, and today we're going to talk about another way that China might die, and some other things. Now, for those of you who are familiar with my position on China, no surprise, demographics are in advanced stages of collapse. We're looking at the final decade of any economic model that humans have ever invented being able to work in a system where they're simply running out of people. That's before you consider that China is the country most dependent upon the U.S. Navy to keep the sea lanes open, and is completely dependent on imported raw materials from the world away and markets for their products that are also a world away. So we've talked about this as the stable. But I'm talking about a much sharper, shorter head. I have never been shy about my respect for the U.S. Navy and its ability to shut down and destroy the Chinese system in a very short period of time, measured in days to weeks, simply because the Chinese don't have reach or range. There are other countries that fall in that general category. Japan has a blue water fleet with more range than China, allowing the Japanese to shut down the Chinese system without getting anywhere close to them. India sits astride all of the trade lanes between Europe and Asia and the Persian Gulf and Asia, so they can easily shut off the energy connection. And with the new security deal between the Americans, the Brits, and the Australians now have mid-range cruise missiles, air-launched, that can shut down the Strait of Malacca. So the Australians can do it too. But things have changed now to that even a small group of Marines out of the United States can do it. Now, the Marines are some terrifying folks. You definitely don't want them to be on the other side. But one of the things I love about them is because they don't have their own independent research budget to develop ships or tanks or planes or whatever that, they tend to use hand-me-down from the other services, and then they innovate and do a little bit of a redesign and repurposing and find fundamentally new ways to use technology. And basically, what seems to have happened in Washington is some high up in the military said, we've seen what the Marines can do with a rifle or a tank or a ship. Let's see what they can do with a Tomahawk missile. Now, a Tomahawk missile is typically a sea-launched cruise missile, either from a surface ship or from a submarine, that has a range of about 1,000 miles, GPS guided, with a 1,000-pound conventional bomb. They made their first big splashy debut in the wars in Iraq in the early part of, the 1990s, sorry, lost a decade there, and have proven to be a reliable tool ever since, because, you put them on a ship goes wherever it wants to, and then it has a 1,000-mile range, and then it hits within a couple of meters of what it's aiming at, just phenomenal accuracy. Well, the Marines have figured out how to put it on a truck, and the first battery, it's a truck that carries 4 of these things, was commissioned just in the last week, and it typically is followed by a quad of additional trucks that have 4 each. So basically, batteries of 4, 20 missiles total per unit. So now, all the Marines have to do is get dropped off somewhere with some roads, and they've got 20 tomahawks they can use to attack whatever they want, anywhere, on sea, on land, whatever. It is arguably the single most important military evolution that I have seen in the U.S. military in the last 40 years. And don't get me wrong. The new F-35 is an impressive piece of hardware, but allowing a few dozen dudes to have 5 trucks and shut down an international waterway or hit hardened facilities hundreds of miles away, that is a fundamentally new piece of versatility in the American
Wow,
military.
yes, it is.
And it is, of course, like everyone in the Marines will tell you, whenever we come up with a good idea, the Army scales it and produces it at scale. And the Army has already started doing that.
Oh,
so we're going to take
no.
one of the more longer-reach weapon systems that the Americans have and basically apply it in mass across the services. Now, if you're looking for someone to blame for this, blame the Russians. The United States has specifically refrained from doing this because of something called the Intermediate Missile Forces Treaty, which was signed with the Soviets back in the 80s. And it basically said that the United States and the Russians would refrain from developing land-based intermediate-range missiles as part of confidence building. But over the last 15 years, the Russians have bit back away from that treaty before basically abrogating it altogether a few years ago. And that freed the United States to follow in their footsteps. Here's the thing, though. When this first went down, everyone was talking about the weakness of the United States, that we had specifically hobbled ourselves in specific technology, which was true. The Russians' research budget is less than 1% the size of the U.S. The Russians going into this didn't have a very good intermediate missile technology force in the first place, and as we've seen in the Ukraine war, it's not performing to snuff. The Chinese, of course, were not bound by this treaty, and so we were researching a lot of things in this area. But now, here we are less than 5 years later, and the United States is in the process of mass expanding a well-known, well-functioning, very high-performing weapon system in mass across the Marines first and then the Army. This isn't a contest, folks. And we've already demonstrated that we can produce these things at scale, and now we're deploying them at scale too. So, I guess the lesson here is if you want to get out of a restriction that the Americans have put you in via treaty, just keep in mind that the Americans will also be removing those restrictions from themselves. They have a larger military, they've got more money, they've got more technology, and ultimately they can research and implement solutions a lot faster than anyone else. And so we have. All right, that's it. Take care.
Okay.
Well, House Judiciary member Congressman Russell Fry joins me now. Congressman, I'm smiling because how do you get through 11 million documents?
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, members of Congress, it used to be that you get thousands.
1 page at a time. 1 page at a time. That's how you get through it. As tedious as it might be, you get through it 1 page at a time. Line by line, sentence by sentence. You just hope that it's not filled with all of its legal jargon and bullshit.
The pages drop on your desk and have to vote in 24 hours. I mean, 11 million pages is just staggering. And as a
Yeah, you should not be allowed to even vote for something that you have not read. Nope. You should be able to do like an English teacher does and say, too long, didn't read.
Former lawyer, the preparation that has to go into that is just insane. Where every single page could be a great win for your client in the courtroom. The prep work on this is just astronomical.
But it sounds like what they're doing is just throwing the whole can of paint at the wall and seeing what color looks the best. I mean, it really is not supposed to be done. I'm just curious. I know that the judges inside the district are more liberal and therefore more likely to be against Donald Trump. But wouldn't the judge say, hey, this is ridiculous? You got to hone it down some?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, just in general, on a routine criminal trial where you might have a scintilla of that, you're looking at a year and a half at minimum in a state court case. So I couldn't imagine, from a federal perspective, with the sheer amount of documents that the prosecution allegedly has, I couldn't imagine them doing this in within the next year. I think it would be unconscionable, and I think it would be quite frankly reckless for a defendant's right to look at the evidence and prepare for a trial for their defense.
All right, next one, Congressman. Trump attorney Alina Habba is calling for Special Prosecutor Jack Smith to be investigated himself. Roll tape.
There is very much a coordinated effort. And if you ever doubted it, think about how Fannie, when she was asked at her press conference if she was coordinating with Jack Smith in D.C. and the government, couldn't give us a yes or no. That says it all. But I can tell you that it's to tie him up. It's definitely political. The motivation is now under investigation by Jimmy.
Yeah, because the March 4th thing is going to be day before Super Tuesday happens, everybody. Anybody remember that one?
Jordan for Fannie, and I believe Jack Smith should be investigated as well.
Fonnie Willis is, of course, the local prosecutor bringing the case down in Georgia. Do you think there was any unethical coordination between Jack Smith and Fonnie Willis?
Well, it could be, and it remains to be seen. But what we've done in House Judiciary, what I think we intend to do, is the same thing we did with Alvin Bragg, is to look at the federal coordination, look at federal assets that were used, how were these used, and to what extent. I think this is a legitimate question that the taxpayers have that kind of, at least from an oversight perspective, could help color, a policy change and something that we're going to do. But I think this invites a larger discussion too about these state prosecutions, in my mind, which is why they shouldn't be happening at all. I have a bill just for that occasion where presidents and former
forgive me
presidents.
for interrupting, but I want to get this in before we have to break. Is it conceivable that the Fonnie Willis indictment in Georgia will be put into the mix of Jack Smith's indictment? That is, that they will be combined and it will go totally to Jack Smith?
I don't know if they'll be combined. What I would like to see is a move to the federal side, because quite frankly, I don't know that I trust the state courts, and I don't trust the jury pool. I think pulling a jury in that jurisdiction is just a disaster for the president. So removing that is really key. And she's made some pretty reckless steps early, just in the way that she's conducted the case, that I think this really helps, in my mind, our argument for judicious oversight over her prosecution of Donald Trump.
Congressman Fry, good to see you, sir. Thank you for being with us. Appreciate it.
So when I was younger, this is a long time ago, there was this hit song out there. It's called Short People. Short people have no reason to live. Well, Scotty, you probably couldn't put a song like that out these days, but it was somewhat controversial. And it was like one of the first things that popped into my head last week when I saw this headline. It was an FT. I mean, just stopped me dead in my tracks. Now, the article is actually focused on the economics around fertility and populations. Obviously, younger populations that are entering the workforce, you have they become powerful economic drivers, right? They're known as demographic dividend. But when fertility remains under trend for a long period of time, like we're getting here in this country right now, it creates problems with the replacement rate, right? You got to replace people. And that's a phenomenon that's known as demographic drag. Now, the article is based on research, actually a research report that was just published last month in the National Bureau of Economic Research. By the way, those are the same folks that timestamp economic cycles, like when are they going to timestamp that recession in 2022? Never mind. Anyway, it does pose this question, right? Population aging and economic growth, from demographic dividend to demographic drag. Functionality, this is what they use, functionality capacities and proxies, right? They use maximum strength, how strong is your grip, and also the ability to recall words. The bottom line is, at our current trend, OECD countries, right, these are your biggest, richest nations, they would be down $8,900 per capita by 2050. If we just stay on the trend that we're on right now, that's $12 trillion. Now, there's an even gloomier, what they call retrospective model, that would have these nations down $23 trillion. Now, the research also offers a caveat that I think is important, that the modeling doesn't account for political pressure that elderly populations put on governments, right? And businesses, for instance, greater pensions, greater health care, long-term care. We know in this country, those things happen because those folks go out and vote, so their voices are heard. So to say the least, it all happens billions of dollars more. It's obviously very worrisome news for rich OECD nations, and even more problematic, in my opinion, for the United States and the G7 nations. By the way, all of them are going to take major economic hits over the next few years. So there's another part of this story, though, and that's the notion of kicking folks to the curb. We're talking 65 and older. We were just talking about Silicon Valley and Wall Street, how enamored they are with these new young superstars who are untested in business. You just heard WeWorks mentioned, right? Untested in business, new ways of doing things, new ways of making mousetraps. We don't know if they work or not, but they love them. They put billions of dollars behind them, and now, of course, you got artificial intelligence. So we're going to see see even more money flow towards these endeavors. But consequently, that means that established endeavors run by older folks with wisdom and expertise are going to be kicked to the curb. That's not creative destruction. That's creativity destruction. American population is aging, right? It is aging rapidly. Now is not the time to sort of usher in this sort of thing of kicking wisdom to the curb, because I got to be honest with you, we need to be holding on to people who know how to do things for a lot longer than we are. By the way, you don't have to be a research scientist to know that old people aren't the worst, but in fact that old people are the absolute best.
Over the past 6 months, we have been investigating as well as exposing the truth behind all of these food processing plants that have been
The Secret Service is paying $16,000 a month now to stage near Hunter Biden in Malibu. Who's paying for that?
That's a question for the Secret Service.
Okay. Hunter Biden is reportedly selling art to pay for his $15,800 a month rent in Malibu. How can you guarantee that people are not going to be buying this art to gain favor with the president?
That is a question for Hunter Biden and his representatives.
If this
I
question
know.
comes
I
up
hear.
after
I
the
hear.
White House, we know
I hear
one
your
of our
question.
buyers got a job from the Biden administration. Can you guarantee that there's
I
no
hear.
quid
I
pro
hear your
quo?
question. I'm not going to get involved in this. That is a question for Hunter Biden's
So,
representatives.
but we know that from Hunter Biden associate now that he sold the appearance of access to then Vice President Biden. Are you confident that he has stopped doing it?
That is a question for Hunter Biden.
If somebody is selling the appearance of access
That
to
is-
the White House,
that is-
that's for the White House.
No, that is your I don't know how you're perceiving that.
It's from testimony by
I-
Devin Archer. He said,
I'm just not, Peter. I'm just not going to get into this. I'm just not.
so this testimony, since the last time that I was in here, Devin Archer talks about how he and Hunter Biden tried to profit off the Biden brand. What is the Biden brand?
I'm not going to get into it from here.
Really? Okay.
Why do so few people trust Klaus Schwab and World
Hold
Economic
on,
Forum? Why is
we
it that
need
in every
to-
single conversation
We need to backtrack for a moment because stupid me skipped one of these. And that one is kind of relevant to what Patrick Bet-David talks about in just a second. So how do y'all like the little slideshow, everyone? Yeah, that's what I got up to this weekend, was making a slideshow for everybody.
Meanwhile, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo
we go.
in China this week. She kicked off her 4-day trip
Mornings
to
with
China.
Maria. This was
Beijing
13 hours ago.
She started the meeting by saying, quote, "It is profoundly important that we have a stable economic relationship. I believe that we can make progress if we are direct, open, and practical." Joining me right now is the Gatestone Institute senior fellow, Gordon Chang. He is also the author of the books, The Coming Collapse of China and The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Gordon, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here. This is the third cabinet.
And his books are dense, everybody. Dense. It's hard to read his stuff. I can only get through a few pages at a time. I have to go and I have to look up shit, and it's just like, oh my god, how I'm ever going to get through these books. So, yeah. Just a note on that. You know, that one's going to take quite a while.
Cabinet member to go to Beijing this summer. Of course, there's also John Kerry, not a cabinet member, but that's the fourth Biden person to go. What is the United States begging China for? The fact that it keeps sending people to Beijing to meet with officials there, despite them serving our Treasury Secretary with psychedelic mushrooms, despite a surveillance balloon, despite cyber activity as Anthony Blinken was getting ready for his trip, and yet we keep sending people there.
Yeah, this is really bad policy because we're not demanding a return visit from a senior Chinese official. And what it does is it makes the Chinese believe that we are supplicants to China. And that makes it harder for President Biden to accomplish his goals. Now, on one hand, you can say, well, it's good that he's not accomplishing misguided goals. But the problem here is that we're making the Chinese actually belligerent. They are engaging in activities at Second Thomas Shoal in the South China Sea and in other places that could trigger conflict. And we would be involved in that. So that's why this is really, really bad policy. Biden thinks he's sort of postponing war. He's actually accelerating it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering what specifically the United States wants from China. I mean, obviously, we're begging them for something. We keep sending cabinet members there. Do you know what they want? I know what China wants. China wants sanctions lifted. China wants to stop any pushback on imports of technology components to China. What is the U.S. begging Beijing for?
Well, there's a couple things on Secretary Raimondo's agenda. One of them is increasing tourism to the United States. but that means we'd also increase tourism to China. China is taking foreigners as hostages. So what we're doing is to encourage people to go to Disneyland, we're asking Americans to put themselves at risk in a militant state. The other thing that the secretary wants, and this is certainly something we should be asking for, actually demanding, is that China start taking deliveries of the 737 MAX. China has still refused to do that, and it really is unjustifiable. Instead of going into China and begging China to do these things, we should be imposing costs for this unjustifiable behavior. And if we do that, then maybe we have a chance of convincing Xi Jinping to do the right thing. But getting on our knees, bowing, this is just not going to work.
Yeah, I don't know what else the U.S. can do, Michael Balboni. This is all coming after all of this provocation from communist China, undermining the United States. And I hope Gina Raimondo doesn't go out to dinner with anybody who's going to order her food and order her psychedelic mushrooms like her colleague Janet Yellen ate.
It's amazing because this did not happen today. This has been going on for years. U.S. companies being asked to get their intellectual property, give it to the Chinese state. This has been the cyber campaign to take the intellectual property of American companies. This economic warfare did not begin this year, and yet we continue to try to placate them by sending people over there. Your point is exactly right. They should be sending folks to us to say we need to have a better relationship because they're the ones who are conducting the economic warfare.
Well, Gordon, this is the reason we constantly ask whether Joe Biden is compromised, given all of the money he has reportedly taken in, him and his family, from communist China. What should the United States policy be at this point, given all of the provocation from communist China and their stated goals to overtake the United States as the #1 superpower?
Yeah, I don't mind someone trying to overtake us. That's just normal competition. But what China is doing is it's engaging in criminal and predatory behavior, and it's trying to take down the existing international system. What we should be doing is getting our businesses off of Chinese soil. I don't care whether you call it de-risking or decoupling. The point is we need to protect ourselves because we can see what's happening, and we're not doing anything to do that. So this is the policy of the Biden administration, which is to encourage our businesses in China. That's absolutely the 100% wrong thing.
Yeah, but let's talk about what's really going on in China today, Gordon, because as much as we talk about, the big bad wolf with all of these provocations from Beijing, their economy is actually weaker than a lot of people understand. So walk us through the realities of what's going on right now in China. Doesn't the Chinese economy need the U.S. more than ever right now for its own growth?
Oh, absolutely, because the Chinese economy is not only weakening, it's also failing, and we can see this from any number of different perspectives. For one thing, the country's gone into deflation, not only in the factory sector, but also consumers. That's a problem because people are not buying. They're not buying because they think that they can get things cheaper in the future, and that's especially true in the property sector, which accounts for somewhere between 25 to 30% of GDP. But we're seeing the stocks fall, big property companies defaulting, the currency weakening. This is a tragic situation, and part of it is because Xi Jinping doesn't believe in economic prosperity. He believes in a state-controlled system. He's taking China back to Maoism. He's closing the country off. We have seen this before in Chinese history through millennia, and it always results in tragedy for the Chinese people.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know really the truth. We don't know the truth in terms of what's happening in the Chinese economy. I mean, should we be believing their economic data?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, we have actually, when you look at underlying indicators, it shows.
Well, I wouldn't think so when you have a social credit system where it's in constant fluctuation and people's monies and funds and whatnot are constantly being monkeyed with. I don't think so. So what you do to one side, you got to do to the other, just like in algebra. So, if money's taken away somewhere, it's got to be given to someone elsewhere. To kind of get this one, I would go look for Scott Westerfield's Extras book. Yeah, go look for the entire Ugly series. If you read that entire series all the way past the 4th book, you will get the entire thought web of the ESG and exactly how they want to use it. By the end of book 4, it will finally come clear of exactly what ESG is. But do you have the time to read it?
That the Chinese economy is contracting. So, for instance, imports, which I think are more important than exports right now, because imports, which have been down 10 straight months in China, show weakening demand. And the import numbers, which are actually quite frightening, they'd be worse because Xi Jinping is importing commodities, stockpiling for war. If you take that out of the equation, it shows that the economy is, at this point, contracting. And that's not what Beijing is saying. They're reporting 5% growth. That's ridiculous.
So, Gordon, real quick before you go, what is the impact of Gina Raimondo's trip to China?
She won't convince the Chinese to do anything, or at least they won't adhere to their promises. The Chinese will become much more aggressive because they see that we're vassals, or at least we think we're vassals. And so this is just, again, very bad policy on the part of the administration.
All right, we'll leave it there. Gordon, good to see you as always. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Maria.
Do you think you'd be happier as a boy?
Big gas company, which he was going after as prosecutor. Watch this.
I have no doubt that there were illegal activities engaged in by Charisma. As a matter of fact, the criminal case had been started before me. It continued to expand. And Wickedshizuku, who at the time held the post of minister, and
This interview really bothers me, and I haven't really noodled out exactly why it's bothering me so much. I mean, it's the timing, maybe. I mean, couldn't anybody, Tom, Dick, or Harry, get an interview with this prosecutor before now? I don't see. I don't see how, and by dropping this guy right in the middle of all of this calamity as it is, proves or validates anything. We already have Biden completely admitting in front of the council, or while he's speaking to the Council of Foreign Relations, that he had him fired so they would get their loans. I mean, it's not rocket science, everyone.
was the founder and CEO of Charisma, started bringing in people who could provide protection for them. Hunter Biden was among them. And the corruption network expanded as a result. There's no doubt in my mind that Charisma was engaged in illegal activities.
KT McFarland joining me now. KT, of course, this guy's talking his book. We understand that. But this interview came out just after John Solomon's reporting showing that a task force of government officials in the United States, Treasury, State Department, and DOJ officials had advocated going with this guy Shokin with the Obama-Biden presidency, and Vice President Biden overrode that task force to get rid of the guy, perhaps because of the fact he was looking into his son's business.
Yeah, here's the thing. So Burisma was doing bad stuff, and they were being investigated. They're about to be caught out for corruption. Ukraine is a very corrupt country. So in the investigations, Burisma says, well, what are we going to do to get out of this? Let's go hire Hunter Biden. He can pressure his father to get the United States to come back at Ukraine to fire the investigator. And that's exactly what happened. And the thing that's now kind of getting more and more, I think, tenuous for the Biden crime family is at the very beginning, remember the Hunter Biden laptop where there were all these emails and suggestions that they were taking bribes from Ukraine, from China, from others. Well, at the time, the Biden family and the intelligence officials said, oh, there's nothing to that. That's Russian disinformation. Well, then it was proved that wasn't disinformation. That was true. So then the argument was,
well, one thing that I would call for immediately, not just the Bidens to be investigated. I want all of the top ones investigated. I want the Pelosi's investigated. I want Mr. McCarthy investigated. I want, who's Mr. Eye Patch? I want Mr. Eye Patch investigated. Mitch McConnell, I want him, I want a colonoscopy on him and his adult children. Any nieces and nephews of any and all of these people. All of their taxes need to be gone through. Just as much. Because there's a lot of corruption. And it's not just on the Democratic side. It's on the Republican side too. So while y'all are looking into Jerry Nadler, y'all be looking into some of the others that exited out right as Paul Ryan was taking his leave. And all of the pundits that you see running around on the TV shows now.
well, Joe Biden didn't know anything about what Hunter Biden was doing. And then we found out that wasn't true. Joe Biden was in on the telephone calls. He met with the people. And then they said, well, they took the money, and Joe may have known something about it, but, it didn't change American policy. Right. It didn't change American policy at all. Well, now we have evidence that, in fact, it did. Yeah. And what happened as a result is the corrupt Ukrainians got $1 billion. The investigation into Hunter Biden's company stopped. And what did the Biden family get in exchange for all that? $2 million.
Well,
so
again,
they were willing to
the
sell
evidence is it's still a lot of.
That sure does seem like peanuts to be able to sell out 313 million Americans. That seems like peanuts.
circumstantial evidence, but is mounting. It is mounting, and of course they're looking at the financial records, which may prove to be in the end the thing that finally connects those dots. Let me switch to China if I can, because our Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is in China right now meeting with officials. Of course, this comes after John Kerry was there, Janet Yellen, of course, with her kowtowing to the Chinese officials was there, and we had Anthony Blinken as well. What are these four officials in the Biden government doing? How are they planning to change U.S.-China policy?
Well, Biden has always been very soft on China. He has a lot of the stuff that President Trump put into effect that were sort of tough on China, tough on Chinese trade, tough on Chinese spying efforts. Biden has sort of undone all of that. And the Chinese, in spite of all of that, their economy is sputtering. They're not recovering from the COVID lockdowns. Their economic growth is slowing down. The Chinese President Xi Jinping has emphasized control by the Chinese Communist Party over all aspects of China, especially the economy, at the expense of economic growth. So the deal the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party made with the Chinese people 50 years ago of, you give us all the power and we'll make sure you have prosperity and riches, that's starting to fade because there's now 20% youth unemployment, for example. The Chinese economy isn't growing like it's supposed to. So this is China's all-out attempt to get back to the Biden administration to say, come on, give us some lucky breaks here, stop any of the other things that are going on, you have to help us grow.
KT, good to see you, KT. Thank you very much. Don't be a stranger.
Why do so few people trust Klaus Schwab and World Economic Forum? Like, why is it that they're in every single conversation of people? These guys want to control you. They want to make decisions for you. They want you to eat insects. There's no way they said you got to eat insects. They would never say such a thing. They would never say you shouldn't eat meat or, U.S. will no longer be a superpower. Why would they say such a thing? U.S. pays into World Economic Forum. So we decided to investigate it. We realized this man, Klaus Schwab, is actually a modern-day Nostradamus. He knows how to predict crisis from happening. He's got that kind of gift. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how much money they've raised, their expenses on an annual basis. You'll see who was invited to be a young global leader. 3 names. What do you see what Tulsi, Musk, and Vivek said to World Economic Forum? We'll cover that as well, and a bunch of other things. Having said that, stay tuned. We're going to study World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab in this episode. So give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you get value out of this video. Let's get right into it. Klaus Schwab founded World Economic Forum in 1971 as a not-for-profit foundation. It is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. It was originally called the European Management Forum, and initially his focus was in the meetings on how European firms could catch up with the U.S. management practices. This is their mission statement. Engage business, political, academic, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. Mission is committed.
Okay. Okay.
To improve the state of the world. So far, sounds pretty good. They made a prediction on what they think is going to happen in 2038 with them, which I think it's important for you to know. Here's some of the predictions. Number 1, you own nothing and you'll be happy. By the way, this is from their website. This is a video they produced. Number 2, the U.S. won't be the world's leading superpower. Instead, a handful of countries will dominate. Number 3, you won't die waiting for an organ donor. Instead, we won't transplant organs. We'll print new ones. Very interesting. Number 4, you'll eat much less meat. If you like meat, you're kind of screwed here. Number 5, 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change. We'll have to do a better job at welcoming and integrating refugees. Sounds very noble, but who knows what that means? If the world's only going to be ran by 5 countries, there's not a superpower. So can they just choose to say this 10 million will be moving to your state? This 8 million is going here. They get to choose that if that's what integration means. Number 6, polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide. There will be a global price on carbon. This will help make fossil fuels history. Number 7, you could be preparing to go to Mars. Oh my God, can you imagine how they're trying to sell to people around the world? Scientists will have worked out how to keep you healthy in space. Science will work out how to keep you healthy in space. The start of a journey to find alien life. Number 8, Western values will have been tested to the breaking point. Checks and balances that underpin our democracies must not be forgotten. How do you feel right now? Are you like watching this and there's nobody that says, sure, let me go Google this myself. Go ahead and do it. Pause the video, check it for yourself, and then come back and you'll see this is what they're telling you. If they're selling you a dream, man, this is awesome. I can't wait to live this life. Well, then follow whatever they're telling you. But if this is a nightmare type of a situation coming from their mouth to you, you may want to investigate these guys before we see them as experts and honorable leaders and subscribe to whatever they tell us to do. Now, here's their objectives I'm going to read to you from their website. Stay tuned. Let me just read it to you. It's not going to sound real, but let me read it to you. So look, I've been in the financial industry since 9/11, the day before 9/11, and I've owned stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, crypto, gold, you name it, I've owned it. But the one thing that's very important part of my portfolio all these years is gold. Gold, number 1. For gold, 5%. Results show initial cyber threat. Have that gold, equity to lose. American Harper Gold star rating from 39.6. Klaus Schwab is not a businessman. He pays himself $1 million a year, but he's not a businessman. He's hurting small businesses like you and I who run businesses. He's not a fan of you. He wants to control you because he thinks he knows what's best for you. Slowing population growth. They're not saying depopulation. It's more like saying slowing population growth. It's a little bit more gentle. And Yuval Harari, who is their number 2 guy at World Economic Forum, said the following about you. Humans are now hackable animals. Are you a hackable animal? That's what the number 2 guy at World Economic Forum thinks about you and me. How do you feel about that? Is this exciting? Like we're learning about an organization that you're just excited about, right? So how does this thing operate? What do they do? This organization meets annually in Davos, Switzerland. It convenes regional summits, industry summits, and other events around the world. Their revenue streams is funded through world's most significant business entities who join the forum as members and partners in order to participate. Approximately 1,000 corporations hold memberships in World Economic Forum, including Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and many others, which we'll take a look at. Membership and partnership fees varies from $60,000 annually to $595,000 annually, according to Bloomberg. And in 2022, there were approximately 2,000 delegates, including Al Gore, John Kerry, Christine Lagarde, Jen Stoltenberg, Ursula von der Leyen, Henry Kissinger, George Soros, and many other high-profile names. You may be curious about the financial statement, what kind of money they're making, what kind of money they're paying out. This is what it looks like. In the last 6 years, in 2017, they had total expense of $278 million, of which they paid $108 million to staff and $170 million to office and activity, and that led all the way down to today, 2022, $383 million in expenses, $130 million to staff, $252 million to office and activity. 383, it's a good number, what they're spending every year, and they're able to get a lot of money from a lot of big names. I'll read you some of the companies right now, but you may ask, why are companies partnering with World Economic Forum? Here's what McKinsey said on what the benefits are to join World Economic Forum. W partners with many international organizations and corporations to run projects addressing global concerns. This year, collaborations are focused on pursuing a net zero pathway, nurturing resilience, reimagining globalization, and supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is DEI, in every part of society. Do you see some touches of ESG in there? I kind of read that. The DEI equals ESG, CEI, Corporate Equity Index score, all that stuff. That's kind of what you're hearing from one of the biggest consulting firms in the world, McKinsey. Now, if you're wondering what other companies are part of, let's read through some of the lists here that you may know. Accenture, AIG, Alibaba, Allianz, Amazon, Bain & Company, Bank of America, Barclays, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, BlackRock, Boston Consulting Group, BP, Bridgewater Associates, Chevron, Cisco, Citi, the Coca-Cola Company, Dell Technologies, Deloitte, Deutsche Bank, DHL Group, EY, which is Ernst & Young, Goldman Sachs, Google, Hewlett-Packard, HP, HSBC, Huawei, IBM, Intel, Johnson & Johnson, JP Morgan & Chase, KPMG, Lazard, MasterCard, McKinsey & Company, Meta, Microsoft, Mitsubishi, Morgan Stanley, Nestle, Open Society Foundation, George Soros, Palantir, PayPal, PepsiCo, Pfizer, PwC, Procter & Gamble, Qualcomm, Royal Philips, Salesforce, Sequoia Capital, Siemens, Sony, S&P Global, Swiss Re, Uber Technologies, UBS, Verizon, Visa, Volkswagen, Volvo, Zurich Insurance Group. See how many different industries, massive companies, multi-billion dollar behemoth companies are members and they're coming together. What's the whole purpose of this? It's a globalism to control what the smaller people don't get to do. They make the decision that's best for you. Kind of gets you thinking, right? Makes you want to be a little bit skeptical. Let's go a little bit deeper. What are some of the initiatives? The first one, just kind of interesting. Remember earlier I said Nostradamus? Check this out. The Great Reset. You want to know what book Klaus Schwab wrote and when? Here's a question for you. I'm right now about to launch my business book that's going to come out here soon called Choose Your Enemies Wisely. Do you know how long we've been working on this book? A bit over 2 years. How long do you think it takes to write your book, publish it, release it to people? Even if you're fast, what would you say? A year? 18 months? Maybe you're super fast, it's what? 6 months. Watch the book this guy wrote. The book's title is COVID-19, The Great Reset, written by Klaus Schwab. Ready for the release date? July 2020. Do you know when COVID shut down America? It was a mess, NHL, NBA, all that stuff. Mid-March. You either wrote the book, published the book, drafted the book, printed the book in 3-4 months, or you kind of timed it very well. How did you know? See what I'm saying? Kind of makes you think, don't it? Am I the only crazy one? Are you kind of processing that as well? So when people say the timing's a little off, you got to give those people a little bit of credibility. People questioning the timing. What perfect timing of a book. Watch how he speaks when he's talking about this.
Yeah, kind of like that Fire and Fury book that only came out 3 days after the Maui fires by Dr. Stone. Anyone? Miles Stone?
You ready? Tell me if this sounds like a welcoming language. Just you know how people talk to welcoming language? Tell me what this sounds like. Every country from the United States to China must participate. Not shall, not ought to, must participate. And every industry, from oil and gas to tech, must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. Who are you to know what we need? From a man who's never ran a business before. All you do is raise money, getting Europe to compete against US because US was your enemy. Somehow you fooled US to come and join WF. Now we must do what you want us to do. Since when does the world run this way? Oh, wait for this. Famous line. You'll own nothing and be happy. Do you own anything? Are you happy? Do you live in a house you own? Is this your home? Are you wearing the clothes you own? Do you like owning stuff that's yours, that you worked hard for? Well, according to him, you ain't gonna own none of that stuff. You're still gonna be very happy. Number 2 is another book that he wrote. He called it The Fourth Industrial Revolution. In this book, he describes the convergence of digital, biological, and physical innovations. It encompasses advances such as artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, predictive healthcare, and digital identities, focused on societal implications of these rapid technological changes. And the 4 revolutions he talks about is the first one is 1784, steam, water, mechanical production equipment, 1870 is the second one, division of labor, electricity, and mass production, 1969, electronics, IT, automated production, and cyber physical systems. And the third one, stakeholder capitalism, which is one of his favorites, by the way. Stakeholder capitalism is a system in which corporations are oriented to serve the interests of all their stakeholders. Sounds noble, okay? Among the key stakeholders are customers, suppliers, employees, shareholders, and local communities. Again, sounds noble if it's by choice, not by force. Under this system, a company's purpose is to create long-term value and not to maximize profits and enhance shareholder value at the cost of other stakeholders. Since our companies go out of business, and last but not least, World Economic Forum has been a proponent of this model, emphasizing a move away from the short-term shareholder value to long-term sustainable growth and responsibility. Once again, if he knew how to do this, why didn't you start your own company and do this yourself? Why force others to do something that you've never done before? You've never started a company. These are valid questions to ask, which I would love to meet Klaus Schwab and do an interview with him, to ask these respectful questions that many others have for someone like Klaus. And number 4 is Young Global Leaders Program, which he launched in 2004. It seeks to identify and nurture the next generation of leaders, recognizes individuals under 40 for their professional accomplishments, commitment to society, and potential to contribute to shaping the future. 1,400 members, alumni of 120 nationalities, includes civic and business innovators, entrepreneurs, technology pioneers, educators, activists, artists, journalists, and many more. This list includes, and I'm going to read some more names for you. Are you ready? Putin's one, Trudeau's another one, Merkel, Macron, Newsom, Yarden, and many others. And by the way, they divided by different industries. Let me read you some other names that you may know. Pete Buttigieg, Chelsea Clinton. I know her husband is a friend. Okay,
friendly podcast guests we've had before. Nikki Haley, Adam Kinzinger, Jonathan Soros, son of George Soros, Lawrence Summers, Paul Krugman. In the media space, Fareed Zakaria, Anderson Cooper, Sanjay Gupta, Andrew Ross Sorkin, Thomas Friedman, George Stephanopoulos, Lachlan Murdoch, Maria Bartiromo. Now here's for technology and social media. Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, Bezos, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, Eric Schmidt, Peter Thiel, Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg. From Great Britain, Tony Blair, Niall Ferguson, Charles Allen. Remember how I told you Tulsi, Musk, and Vivek? All three were nominated, but they said, not interested. We're okay. You don't need to recognize us. Thank you, but thank you. So again, you pick and choose. You may be watching this saying, I want to get nominated for this. Great, you can go get nominated for this guy. But you may say, I don't really want to get nominated. Well, here's what some people who said good things about him said, and here's what some people said bad things about the World Economic Forum. Let me read both of them to you. Number one, Al Gore, boiling the oceans, creating these atmospheric rivers and the rain bombs and sucking the moisture out of the land and creating the drought and melting the ice and raising the sea level and causing these waves of climate refugees. It's kind of like, is that an encouraging message? If you listen to this, you almost want to go to space to leave the interest end of the world here. And that's positive to say good things about the World Economic Forum. But let me give you some of the other side. Here's what Ron DeSantis said. The elites in the Davos World Economic Forum want to run everything and turn everybody else on the planet into a serf or peasant. Tucker said the World Economic Forum seems to exist to destroy national economies. Musk rips World Economic Forum, unelected world government. And I'll read this one to you for somebody from the Labour Party, Swiss Labour Party, liberal left progressive like an Antifa of Swiss. Here's what Alexander Anlin had to say about this. The main yearly meeting of CEOs of transnational corporations and bourgeoisie politicians from leading capitalist countries who discuss without any democratic legitimacy nor any control from the people questions that concern everyone. The countries of the global south have nothing to say about decisions that...
Have you ever heard of an economy being taxed into prosperity? I haven't.
That will harm them. This kind of forum shows the fundamentally anti-democratic, oligarchic nature of our system. The protection of the environment is also a major discussion in the World Economic Forum. However, every year, 1,000 private jets fly to Davos, which is equal to the pollution emitted by 300,000 cars altogether. Man, they really care about this climate, protecting it for you. So how excited are you right now? You're still saying, well, this is a little crazy. Come on, man, you guys are overselling this. No problem. You ever had insects? Have you ever eaten insects? Well, I'm going to read this to you from their website just a year ago, February 2022. 5 reasons why eating insects could reduce climate change. Not private jets. Not private jets. Even Mario's laughing. Insects could reduce.
Yeah, no to the bugs. Absolutely no bugs. Why? Well, the reason we don't want to eat bugs is because it'll cause asthma. The chitin in their exoskeletons will cause inflammatory things to happen to your respiratory system. So that's why we don't want to eat bugs. You only want to eat the caterpillars or the grubs. The ones that don't have the exoskeleton. And only in survival situations. So, yeah, nothing that goes crunch.
Climate change. Number one, edible insects can produce equivalent amounts of quality protein when compared to animals. How awesome is that? Insects require less care and upkeep than livestock. Number three, we're actually running out of protein. Number four, insects are part of virtuous eco-cycle. Why don't you be virtuous and eat more insects? And number five, you can start small and work your way up. Just, why do you not want to eat insects? Isn't this noble? Doesn't it get you emotional thinking about how much they care about us? Who cares about you as much as they do? Who else makes you eat insects to live a healthier life? Eco. Who else makes you do that? Noble people. Like World Economic Forum. Look, I got to tell you, I like talking to everybody, and I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I'm telling you, I would love to talk to Klaus Schwab sincerely. I would love to fly out to Geneva to sit down and talk to this guy, wherever he lives. I'd love to go to his place and have a conversation with him. Klaus, this doesn't make any sense. There is no selling the dream. Everything is force, must, you better, all of this. That's just not the American way. And I feel you don't like the American way because the American way allows for us to choose. Free to choose. If somebody wants to eat insects, go for it. Put mayonnaise on it, put mustard, hot sauce, whatever you want to do. But you can't say and fool American people saying eating insects is good for you. So if you're watching this saying, I don't know, man, I've heard a lot about the World Economic Forum. I'm just verifying everything you're saying, but this kind of stuff is adding up. It's kind of weird. Insects, cashless society, carbon tax, social credit score. You want to have a social credit score on how you voted, on how you eat. You got your FICA allows you to get a loan to buy a house. Now imagine your social credit score. Which way you gonna vote? Hey, do you notice how you want to know? We can't give you this. I want more insects. No, you voted this way. We're not going to give you. Do you want to have fewer insects? Can you imagine how crazy it is to think about? They dictate what you get based on your social credit score. So solution today, I was talking to Russell Brand on his podcast, and he was asking about all the stuff that's going on with corporate elites and these capitalists that are doing what they're doing. There's a very big difference between capitalists that are running their small businesses and growing and creating jobs. These guys controlled by World Economic Forum are controlled. So what can you do about it? Number one, be aware, talk about it, discuss it with your congressman, discuss with your family, publicize it, do your own research, educate everybody around you, and choose what companies you do business with. The way you get to vote in capitalism, which is awesome, is if you don't like what some company does, go support another one that supports the values that you're okay with. That's how you get to vote when it comes down to capitalism. That's why some companies go out of business, who refuse to listen to who? The customer. Who's the customer? You. You have the power. We have the power on how we vote with these businesses, by the way we spend our money. Okay, so if you got value out of this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If it got you thinking, share it with other people, but I got another video I want you to watch it.
And that's all I have for the night. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Wickedshizuku's Reviews, Thoughts on News, and we will see you Wednesday. Have a good night, everybody.